everyone. This is Barbara Christensen, your host, and you are here at the Barbara Christensen VlogCast. And today I want to talk a little more about our brain and amino acids, and I'm going to be getting into a little bit more personal issues here over the next few weeks. This last weekend, December 6th, was my father's birthday. Now, my dad has been passed since the April before I met my husband, and he passed from cancer. And most of his life, he was an alcoholic. Now, I had such resentment towards him growing up because at a young age, both of my brothers, who are older, started drinking. My mom, being a single parent, was working and working long hours, which left me as this young girl in charge of an even younger child, my little sister, with no support whatsoever from my father. He never paid child support. We were lucky on our birthdays if we got a birthday card with a $5 bill in it. And of course, the birthday card would include all of the sadness about how he didn't have any money to give to us, and he didn't have anything to give to us. Oh, but here's some pictures I've included of my new stereo system or my new couch. And he didn't work. My grandmother, who was also an alcoholic, owned 2 houses and back in Pennsylvania, and she lived in the one and he lived in the other. And so here I was, this young child, being placed in an adult situation, which so many kids have gone through. And I resented him. I was so resentful. He came to visit a couple times, and I didn't want to have anything to do with him because I felt like my life choices were being taken away from me because of his life choices. Then I was also very angry because of my brothers. Their alcoholism turned into drug addiction along with the alcoholism. And that spurned a whole nother level of responsibility that I ended up getting engaged in. And it created this caretaker personality in me, where most of my relationships in my life were then formed by me taking on someone that I was going to take care of and fix, rather than me taking on relationships that were going to enhance my life. And so I still, to this day, don't have the greatest relationships with either of my brothers. One of my brothers I didn't talk to for years because the thefts and the irresponsibility and the choices that he makes are so infuriating to me. And in fact, my oldest brother, has been clean, quit smoking, quit drinking, quit doing drugs, everything, for 5 years. And my other brother also went through a whole process and cleaned up his act. But he still makes the same bad choices. And I believe that those bad choices go back to our brains and go back to our deficiencies. And the more I'm learning, the sadder I get about the fact that, no one who had any of this knowledge was able to be there to make a change for my father, which then would have changed all of our life. Because my dad, when I was very young, before he moved back to Pennsylvania, he went to the VA hospital several times. He went to the psych ward. He went into rehab. Nothing worked because I believe they weren't going after the functional problems. Now, my husband has ADD, and my daughter has either ADD or ADHD. I mean, it's all overlapping anymore. And I believe that I also have something within there. And in fact, whereas I stopped drinking, I was a drinker again also as a teenager, and I stopped because I realized that it was taking me down that same path. But I also have that same addiction gene, and I use that addiction gene in other ways than drinking. Like shopping was a huge addiction of mine, and still sometimes when I'm really just low, I, get that feeling that I want to go shopping. So if we think about the amino acids, and we think about L-glutamine, which is what is the precursor to GABA. Now, GABA is the happy place. That's the happiness. That's the calming. That's what we're finding more and more, that there's this relationship between the development of the brain dysfunctions and the way that the brain handles GABA. They have found that GABA levels can be part of the functional process of what's going on with epilepsy. GABA is definitely involved with what's going on with anxiety. And so with ADD and ADHD, they found that GABA acts as this moderating force in our nervous system. And it's inhibiting this excited neuron activity that can be being stimulated in our bodies by a variety of stresses, and that can be physical and mental. And so they did this study in Japan. In the study in Japan, they took 60 students. And one thing to know in Japan is that they're looking at the form of GABA that is naturally manufactured in the fermentation process of the bacteria that's used to ferment vegetables for kimchi. And so the synthetic form of GABA is a compound that's not allowed for use in Japan because it's considered dangerous. Oh, but it's great over here, right? Yeah, that's another story. So only natural forms of GABA are approved for use in Japan. And they use this a lot to aid in stress and promote relaxation. And natural GABA is a very popular ingredient in their foods and beverages in Japan. So in this study in Japan, they took 60 sixth graders, and these students were divided into two different groups. One group received a placebo. The other group received 100 milligrams of this natural pharma-GABA. Then they had the students take a math test. They wanted to see how their results would be, and they also took some tests, some saliva tests, to look for markers of stress. Now, what they found was that the pharma-GABA group, not only did they get a 20% higher number of answers, but they also got a 20% higher number of answers correctly. So this didn't just help these kids to think through the process faster, but it also allowed them to get the answers right more often. When they checked the saliva markers, they found that the pharma-GABA group also were more relaxed and they were more focused than the placebo group. So if we think about this and we think about our brain chemistry, and GABA is very similar. The pharma-GABA is very similar to our brain as the effects of meditation and prayer. So think about that feeling of calmness and improved focus, and think about children that have hyperactivity and that have, this ADD and other anxiety issues. So now going back to the alcohol, when it is processed by our body, it produces this, it mimics this GABA in our bodies, and then it actually inhibits the GABA receptors. So it binds to the GABA receptors and it stops that signaling. And so even drinking a glass of wine increases our dopamine, and it releases other inhibitors such as serotonin. And most people with ADD have low serotonin. So it kind of reinforces this sort of reward center in our brain. And that's why alcohol is enjoyable. It activates our happy place. It makes us rewarded. But it's also why you have that slow reaction time when you overdrink. So what happens is that you have this tolerance, I believe, in the people that become alcoholics. And they can often drink people under the table, and it reduces their stress. It gives them that happiness. It gives them that GABA feeling that they're not getting elsewhere. But sadly, the consequence is that when you're drinking all the time, you're depleting your GABA function in the brain and creating this hyper excited glutamate system. And so you feel horrible and stressed out, and you have these mood issues. But if you drink, then you have that feeling that you're not getting because of your problems that you've created here with your GABA, or that you also already had with your GABA. And so I starting to see this connection that, my dad was this genius. He could take any class at the university and ace it. He would decide that he was going to be a physicist. He'd take a semester or two, ace all the classes, get completely bored with it, and be done. He's going to be an accountant. Take a couple semesters or a semester, ace everything, get bored with it. He could not, however, sit down and proofread an essay. He could not focus. He didn't have the attention to sit down and do that. He was, shiny thing, shiny thing, shiny thing. And, these are signs that we see with those. They say that those that have ADHD and ADD are often super smart. The problem is that they can't focus that brain power to where they need to be. And I find that really sad because we don't say, hey, you have ADD. You might want to get an amino acid test, see where your levels are. Instead, we say, hey, you have ADD. We need to go right to, let's put you on this medication. And so I believe that if we did testing, that we would find a high level of these people that are alcoholics and drug addicts that have this amino acid issue and that actually could have been or have been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. They looked at the serotonin levels and stress and binge drinking, and the latest statistics indicate that more than 12% of 8th graders and 30% of 12th graders report drinking 5 or more drinks in a row in the past 2 weeks. What's starting these kids drinking earlier and binge drinking earlier? And it's interesting because this low serotonin level is also associated with impulsivity and high-risk behavior, and that adolescence, the serotonin levels drop naturally. So imagine if your serotonin levels drop naturally, but you already had a low level of serotonin levels. And puberty is happening earlier. And so we need to start looking, I believe, more at biochemical answers and neurochemistry and nutrition rather than going straight to saying, you just have to take this medication. Medication is a part of it, but it can't be all of it because we're not addressing the functional reasons. When you increase GABA, you decrease anxiety. And I'd be interested to find out because when I was younger, I had major anxiety disorder. So badly that the only place I would leave the house for was to go to work, come home, and there was one friend's house that I felt safe at. To go to that friend's house and come home. That was it. For 18 months, that was all I did. And in fact, once I had a friend who I used to go to her cabin all the time. And so I went to her cabin, and by this time I had realized that the secret to my anxiety was if I started feeling anxious, it was like an allergic reaction. I started feeling like I couldn't breathe, my heart started pounding, and if I would take Benadryl, it calmed me down. So it'd be interesting to go into how the histidine amino acid reacts and all of that, and what the Benadryl reaction was in context of this GABA, because GABA decreases anxiety. And the effects of alcohol no matter how long you've been drinking, whether it's for a week or whether it's 20 years, you still get that anxiety-relieving effect from drinking. That's why they find this big link between anxiety and alcohol abuse. They go off hand in hand, skipping into the sunset. So there's 2 or 3 genes that they've identified that are relevant for alcoholism. And it would be interesting to see if I'd like to know if those same genes are also genes that they are saying are identified as relevant for ADD. Because what I'm starting to believe is that had my dad been able to see a biochemical, neurochemical doctor and gotten put on an amino acid therapy, that he could have been a different person. Alcohol, as well as other addictive drugs, are associated with the neurotransmitter dopamine in the brain. And so the abuse elevates the dopamine levels in the brain regions. And so, the theory is that, the theory that once was that alcohol blocked the uptake of dopamine transmitters. But they've determined that that's wrong, and that it doesn't inhibit. In fact, chronic alcohol use actually increases the number of dopamine transporters. And so when the alcohol stops, so does the dopamine production. So do you see how if you have almost no dopamine, then you're going to feel really, really, really low. So if you can use something natural to increase your dopamine, which is where they often go with pharmacological drugs, is to get you back up to a normal level of dopamine so that you don't feel that need to relapse. They also are finding that this disrupts the sleep cycle. And so our brain has that circadian schedule, which is what the GMS AM/PM is something for someone that has a problem with their circadian schedule. That's a really good supplement of choice if you can take all of the nutrients in it. I mean, you have to look at it individual as a whole, how this is going to help you. But even just a little bit of alcohol consumption disrupts that schedule. And so you find that alcoholics have a lot of sleep issues. Well, they also find that a lot of these amino acids in our body are responsible for this. And your hormones as well are responsible for this. So what if you have these underlying methylation issues and you're just messed up at the cellular level, and your clock genetics are not functioning properly? If you think about that DNA, they say that your clock genes are turned off and on by the rise and fall of your calcium levels. So any disturbance in these calcium channels can disrupt the signals. Now we're getting into this big other area, because So if alcohol is blunting this because it's interrupting this, calcium rise and fall, and it's not naturally happening appropriately, well, what else is in our diets that's affecting our calcium levels? Oh, wait, everything, acidic, everything. So it's no wonder that we're walking around with our brains cycling improperly, like this, crazy bunch of people that are, like permanent jet lag is how I kind of feel about it, which is funny because since I started drinking amino acids daily, I haven't had any problems really sleeping. If I wake up, I go right back to sleep. I'm waking up in the morning when I'm supposed to be waking up. I'm feeling like, oh, it's okay, it's time to get up. I can get out of bed. And I'm feeling like it's time to go to sleep at night. So I want to get into next week. I'm going to try to do some more research personally, because the inhibitors of histamine methylation in the brain forms this acid which interacts with the GABA receptors. And so I want to take a look at how this relates to my anxiety, my allergies, my addiction genes. But I would really recommend, if you, feel like you have any of these certain problems, that you start the process. Find out what is going on with your amino acids, because that's a really easy test to do, is to find out about your amino acids. And see if maybe a little GABA wouldn't be something that could help you. Because, nature is nature. When we can find something natural that is going to help with our different needs chemically and emotionally, why wouldn't we want to use it? That's kind of how I feel. I also want to get into GABA and how it's being used for other issues. So, they're doing, they believe that this GABA deficiency plays a role in so many different disorders, not just anxiety, not the ADHD, ADD, but also depression and panic attacks, insomnia. They're finding that it's very important for the problems that we're seeing with fibromyalgia. They're saying that 250 milligrams 3 times a day or 750 milligrams once a day for fibromyalgia is a huge support for the system. So you want to remember that you have to take, they say you take GABA on an empty stomach. I have seen studies that say that you're better off taking the L-glutamine, which is the precursor to GABA. But I think that, again, you have to talk to your physician and find out which one based on, and I'm talking about a real functional type biochemical physician that actually can think outside the box. But you want to find out, is this something that your body can use? If you can't break down the GABA and get it through the blood-brain barrier, it's no use to take GABA, then you really do want to take that L-glutamine, amino acid. And I do believe, from what I've read, that GABA supplements cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. So they can't be used in the brain. So you do have to go to those GABA derivatives. And so that's important to know, that you don't want to just go buy something that says, oh, take GABA, buy this GABA. Because that's just going to be ridiculous. It's not going to help if you're trying to help your brain. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I wish everyone in my family would get an amino acid test. I plan on doing it. And I think that it's just important that we know all of the underlying issues in our life so that we can try to repair them and live the best life possible. Because that's what we all really want, is to live a good life, to be happy. And some of these tests really, they can be pretty cheap if you go do it on your own. I know that a lot of times we think that, it's going to be so expensive if we go to the doctors, but we can do these tests on our own. So depending, a urine amino acid test on your own is going to be $289. And the most expensive one I'm seeing on my labs page is $339. And that is for either a blood or a urine amino acid analysis. So, you can go to, it's www.bijacoaching, which is BIJA coaching, coaching.com/lab tests. And you can go to the lab that I prefer, which is True Health Labs. And they have lab tests in the U.S. and in Europe that you can get done. If you can not get it done from your doctor, get it done somehow, because some of these tests could be the difference between life and death, especially with like the MTHFR, with the methylation and how it can affect your heart and cancers. These are things that you need to do. It's important that you have this freedom to be able to have affordable tests within your reach, so take advantage of them when you can. So this is Barbara Christensen again, and I will show all the ways that you can contact me through social media. And, just give me some feedback on what you're thinking and how you're feeling and what else you'd like me to delve in on, nutritionally, genetically speaking. I'm not a doctor. I am just a gal that's gone through all of these problems. And as a life coach, I found that finding out these answers can impact the other areas of your life, and that's why it's so important. So this is your bubble girl, as I joke, because of all my allergies. I should live in a bubble. One day that may not be true. One day I might find that all the underlying problems to my allergies have been fixed. Who's to say? But in the meantime, have a fantastic week, and I hope you've enjoyed the show. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.